Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock, one that I've really been enjoying and that I want to bring to your attention. Oftentimes, some of the bigger artists in the modern prog scene that I want to highlight and talk about because I'm a big fan of this scene. I've been a big prog fan since the early 2000s. Ever since my dad showed me the classic 70s prog of Yes and Genesis and Gentle Giant, and then I went on exploration into it on my own, looking at modern bands like SPOCK'S and Flower Kings and Dream Theater, and just became obsessed with this world and with this new scene of progressive rock that used the bands that my dad liked and that I loved as inspiration, but bringing it into a modern era, and it just really blew my mind, and it's been my love for the past 25 years or so. And SPOCK'S has been at the center and front stage of this revival to me and in my tastes. And here they are with their 14th studio album, the Archaeoptimist, and that's the album I'm talking about today. Their previous album, Noise Floor, came out in 2018, so it's been a little bit of time. This is actually the longest stretch between studio albums in SPOCK'S career. So a lot of people were a little bit afraid that the band was basically folding, or at least wasn't interested in making new studio records, which to me is a tragedy because they have so many great ones, and to me they're one of the shining stars of the modern prog world. But I think their previous album, Noise Floor, was fraught with a lot of tension, and the band wasn't very happy with its release, and it didn't do as well as they expected. They put a lot of heart into it, and I think Noise Floor is a very underrated record. I think it's actually stronger than a lot of people give it credit for. And I don't know why it didn't grab hold in the prog scene as much as it could have. But for whatever reason, I think it left the members of SPOCK'S kind of unexcited about the prospect of continuing, of putting all this work and effort into these studio records to get basically no return from it. And it's kind of indicative of this music scene at large, definitely within the prog world, that a lot of these bands put so much talent and effort and work into these records, and they just don't really get the acclaim and attention that they very nearly deserve, and they definitely don't make the money that they deserve to make because of the modern landscape of music and how people stream now, and not many people buy records, and there's a lot of different factors. But all that being said, they've done some live dates in the midst of all this, and I think they still were a band and still wanted to play live and had played at different festivals and different individual concerts, but it seemed like their interest was maybe a bit low when it came to doing studio music. So luckily, I think Ryo Okamoto is really the star here, who brought this record to the band's attention and really spearheaded the campaign to get this made as a SPOCK'S record. So thanks to Ryo, we've got a fantastic, excellent SPOCK'S record to dive into and enjoy, that any fan of SPOCK'S past and present should just gobble up with delight, because it's just fantastic. Ryo Okamoto put out his solo record in 2022 called Myth of the Mostrophus, and he worked with a man called Michael Whiteman, who is a member of a band called I Am the Manic Whale, another prog band that I champion and absolutely love. And it proved to be just an excellent collaboration between these two musicians. And that record was absolutely fantastic, one of my favorite prog records of that year, and had, of course, a very vintage SPOCK'S flavor. It makes sense. And almost pretty much all of the past and present members of SPOCK'S were on that record in some capacity. So I believe what happened was they were working on a second solo record, and Ryo just decided that this would make more sense as a SPOCK'S record, and presented it to the band and said, hey, why don't we make this as our next SPOCK'S record, this material that he'd been writing with Michael Whiteman with their solo record in mind. And that was one of the best creative decisions I think that could have possibly happened, because this record is an absolute blast to listen to. It's absolutely wonderfully crafted and harkens back to all the classic eras of the SPOCK'S crew. I love this record to death. I think it's absolutely a powerhouse. The playing on it is absolutely fantastic and next level. The production value, we get Rich Mauser at the head doing this music, doing the production. and it just sounds so pristine and so classic to all the records that he's produced for SPOCK'S Beard in the past. And we get a great lineup here. Of course, we have Ted Leonard on lead vocals, guitars, and keyboards. We've got Alan Morse on guitars and vocals, Ryo Okamoto on keyboards and vocals, Dave Maros on bass, keyboard, and vocals, and then the newest member, Nick Potters, on drums and vocals. So an excellent crew of musicians who all shine in their own fashion. Like I mentioned, I think Ryo Okamoto is the star of this show. There's so much spotlighted keyboard playing in moments. You can tell that there was probably a lot of focus on the keyboards because this was going to be a keyboard-centric solo record. But I think every band member gets a chance to shine as well. So it doesn't feel like a solo record. It feels like a full band project. You get some excellent Alan Morse guitar soloing moments. You get some really funky, cool, excellent grooves from Dave Maros. He's probably the second place MVP for me, just with some of these really killer grooves. He taps into this kind of Chris Squire-esque bass sound, but then brings a lot of funk and energy and joy to his playing. And Nick Potters is an impressive drummer who I didn't know was as excellent as he is. They've been through quite a few drummers at this point. Of course, they had Nick DiRigilio, who, in my eyes, is one of the premier best prog rock drummers ever, honestly. And then you had Jimmy Keegan, which filled in that spot really well and played expertly on their live shows. And now we've got Nick Potters, who slips into this role expertly well, filling the shoes of these prog giants, and does so just in an expert way, where you wouldn't even realize that Nick DiVirgilio or Jimmy Keegan aren't part of this lineup. So, absolutely wonderful record. Every track has something interesting and fun and unique about it. And what I love about SPOCK'S Beard, I feel like I'm repeating a lot of what I said and raved about in my Moron Police review, but I love music that blends these worlds of excellent, catchy pop hooks with this adventurous, fun, positive, uplifting, proggy spirit to it as well, that takes cues and influences from bands like Yes and Genesis, and on this record, particularly like Kansas, and brings it into a new era, a new freshness, a new modern sheen to that style sound, and it just warms my heart. It makes me happy and makes it endlessly re-listenable and draws me in, because sometimes I listen to prog music and it's kind of like generic prog sounding music, but there's nothing that really is memorable and that draws me back in. It's kind of like, well, it's pleasant when I listen to it, but when I try to return to it, I don't remember it very well. It's like it's all this cacophony of sound that's pleasant, but nothing that sticks with me once I turn the album off. Whereas with a band like SPOCK'S Beard, I think they really work for me because the songs are memorable. I remember them well after I've listened to the record, and when I come back to the record, it's like revisiting an old friend and remembering all these classic melodies that they've put forward on the record, and still having a lot of layers to unpack with the different proggy instrumentation, where there's different elements that you might miss on a first listen, and then you re-listen like, oh, I didn't realize there's that cool acoustic guitar part in the background, or there's that cool little keyboard riff that I didn't really realize on first listen. So you get to the fun of the complexity and uncovering layers and like figuring out this puzzle, but also the immediate fun of these pop hooks that draw you and grab you right off the bat and become memorable and earworms that you continue to think about and want to re-listen for. So that's the perfect marriage of music for me and my personal taste. It's not for everyone, but I think SPOCK'S Beard, that's why I fell in love with SPOCK'S Beard in the first place. They were really the first modern band that I just fell for and felt like, oh, this is my music. This is music that was meant for me and for my tastes. I love Genesis and Yes and Gentle Giant, the bands my dad was showing me, but those felt like my dad's bands, where this was the first band that I could claim as my own and that I could actively follow because they were still making great music. And I am thrilled to say that this new album is up to the same level of anything they've ever produced. And I might venture to say it's still new to me, so I still have that kind of new honeymoon phase kind of bias to this record, but I would venture to say I think it's the best thing that SPOCK'S Beard has produced post Neil Morse. I used to give that designation to Brief Nocturnes and Dreamless Sleep, But I think this may be a touch better than that record. As hard as that is to admit, I think there's just something extra here. There's just some secret sauce in these tracks that bring back that vintage Spock's Beard vibe that I've been craving for all these years. It begins with Invisible, beginning with an a cappella opening before we get into this propulsive, high-energy prog track. It starts right off the bat with that classic Beard energy with grooving bass lines and just kicking drums and vintage keyboard wizardry and great Alan Morse guitar playing. It's just all here, and a great first showcase for the record to get you into the music. And I think ironically, this is probably the weakest track of the record in a weird way, but it doesn't mean that the album starts off weakly. It just has this great build on the record where every track just gets progressively better and better. You start at this super high level and somehow they continue to exceed it as each future track plays out. Next we have Electric Monk, which begins with this big explosive opening with organ stabs and vintage Spock's Beard sounds, lovely guitar moments leading into the chorus. We get some quick shuffling drums and some Squire-esque bass lines and great keys. There's a cool anthemic slowdown that leads to piano, acoustic guitar, and sweetly sung vocals. Great soaring guitar lines doubled harmonically with keyboard, ending with that big bombastic prog flavor. Just another classic prog track from the Beard, giving all that energy and focus that they're known for, and doing it in a fairly compact package for prog in a 6-minute track. Aforethoughts continues the Thoughts saga, which I'm a huge fan of as a Gentle Giant nerd. I love the counterpoint vocals and the quirky, like, strange nature of the different sounds and different quirks that come about throughout the track. Opens with a clear callback to the original Thoughts, and definitely continues in a crazy manic way with keyboard and guitar soloing and excellent sick groove and great strong melodies right out the gate. Some cool acoustic guitar strumming and Ted's vocals intercut with Thoughts-esque proggy stabs all throughout. And then in the middle of the track, of course, we get the a cappella vocal with all the different rounds and that counterpoint style that Gentle Giant was known for and that Spock's Beard adopted with Neil Morse's help. Love the bass drum groove leading to a stellar organ solo and jazzy piano workout. It reaches epic proggy heights and is just excellent as it reprises the chorus, and they break it up with this kind of quirkier, bouncier take on that same melody before a big a cappella ending. So fantastic track, bringing all the right callbacks to one of their classic tracks from the past. St. Jerome in the Wilderness is a slightly longer track, a 9-minute track. And it opens, bringing to mind a lot of the classic Spock's Beard tracks from like the, Beware of Darkness, Kindness of Strangers era, bringing to mind tracks like Flow or Walking on the Wind. That's really cool, killer groove, great accents from guitars and keys. Ted Leonard does an amazing job with the vocals, bringing the chorus to life. Rio has some classical inspired piano playing here with a great bass part underneath. And excellent sounds, powerhouse rocking section, killer grooves, organ soloing, a freaky keyboard solo before leading to the epic conclusion. It's just everything you'd want in this compact 8.5-minute track of Spock's Beard goodness. I just love it. It brings to mind all of my favorite moments from the band. And we're still just getting going here because we've got this 20-minute epic track called the Archaeoptimist, the title track. And opens with this big epic soaring guitar, deliberate drum work, and organ atmosphere, played in epic fashion as it opens up. It quiets down to some lovely vocals and piano playing with great bass lines. Acoustic guitar and piano play together as we get an electronic synth part that washes over with some mellotron, leading to an infectious drum and bass groove and a beautiful play out in the guitar and an ominous kind of keyboard section from Rio. But once we get kind of that out of the way, this kind of epic classic opening that is very, very Neil Morse inspired, giving you the big grand themes before giving you kind of this more acoustic-y vocal-led section. We get into this extremely funkified section with this almost Toto-esque groove, great soaring vocals from Ted. Dave Maros is just killing it on this funky bass part. and it just grooves and you bop your head along to the music, and it's really fun. It almost gives some inspiration, almost like a Steely Dan or something like that, and it's just a total left turn that is so welcome at this point in the album. I just really love that funk groove that they bring to this piece that I think gives it an extra flavor that just brings another side to Spock's Beard sounds. The next section settles into a different funky groove with some killer funk bass playing and cool keyboard bits. It gets more rocking as it goes, giving this kind of big Kansas energy, pretty hard and heavy, and gets into these like crunchy guitar riffs and powerful drumming. Quirky proggy highlights with the whole band shining and that ever-present Dave Merrow's bass work and keyboard magic just hitting it out of the park. And of course we get to the big epic closing with huge harmony vocals and epic guitar soloing, reprising the melody from the beginning in the classic Spock's Beard and Neil Morse tradition. And it's just wonderful music to behold. It's just a fantastic epic and should rank right alongside all of the classic epics in their catalog. It's been a while since they've done like a big meaty epic like this, and so it's really satisfying to get it on this record and for it to be so strong and so powerful. And then it's not over yet, because we get one of the best tracks of the record next, called Next Step. This is a wonderful closer that begins with this kind of Bach-style piano fugue in a classical style before we get into that classic Spock's Beard instrumental interplay with soaring melodies on guitar and keys full of energy and positive spirit, great Ted Leonard vocals, an explosive, fun, free-flying chorus, plenty of that Spock's Beard magic. And then it quiets down into this very Genesis-inspired, like 12-string acoustic guitar with flutes before Ted's vocals float in. Just totally gorgeous once you add Rio's piano accents to this part of the track. Leads us into a really proggy groove with cool bass lines and killer synth soloing, still bringing to mind that kind of Genesis flavor. And you get an excellent Alan Morse guitar solo over big, bombastic, vintage prog. Another cool classical-inspired synth solo interplaying perfectly with the bass and the drums going off in the background. Big, epic, melodic reprise here. It's like bringing a classic Genesis, like something like Firth of Fifth, into the modern era and giving it a Spock's Beard flavor. And the result is just expertly crafted modern prog that really speaks to me and is one of the best tracks of the year, and I totally love it and adore it. Just a fantastic closer. And so every track, there's 6 tracks on the record, every one is expertly crafted. It all sounds pristine. Like I said, that Rich Mauser production is just perfect. Ted Leonard is great on the vocals. I know his vocal style isn't probably for everyone. I know some of my fellow YouTubers don't really care for his vocals, but I think he does expertly well on here and brings to mind a little bit of like Steve Walsh from Kansas. And I've always loved his sound with Spock's Beard. I think it's a perfect blend. I think he really just came right into the band and just fit in perfectly. And like I mentioned, Alan Morse plays a lot of great guitar solos here in his kind of signature style, and Nick Potters is killing it on drums. We get those wonderful Dave Merrow's bass grooves throughout the record, adding some funk edge definitely in parts of the title track. And Rio is just the star of the show, playing everything on keyboards, mellotrons, organ, piano stuff, beautiful classical inspiration, wonderful jazzy moments. He's just an expert performer, and it just really makes this shine in a way that Spock's Beard really needed. I think this is just a shot of energy to the band. I hope it catapults them to continue wanting to make music like this, because I'm here for it. I hope they make more albums in this style, and I think this is one of the best releases that the band has ever produced. And I hope you guys will listen to it and give it a chance, because it's well worth your attention. This, to me, is the premier modern prog. You know, if you really want a feel for what modern prog is like, if you just know the 70s stuff and are curious what modern prog can sound like, this is a great representation of the genre to me. And it brings all those elements in expert fashion, sounding pristine in modern style production, with the band clearly giving their own unique stamp on things, bringing their own personality to the forefront, crafting something that feels uniquely them. and I just can't get enough of it. Definitely one of my favorite records of the year. Another one that's in heavy contention for my favorite album. It's going to be a hard list to craft of what my favorite records of the year are. How am I going to decide the number one record when everyone's knocking out of the park like this? But fantastic, must listen, and I give it the highest recommendation I can possibly give any album. Thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully you appreciated this review, and I'll hopefully catch you guys in a future episode. Bye, everybody. Enjoy the music.